I never thought I'd have to choose between being a mother and being a landlord until my own son threatened to call the police on me for stepping foot on my own property. The house keys felt heavy in my hand. As I stood on the front porch, I'd been paying the mortgage on for 15 years. The same porch where I taught him to ride his bike. Now he was yelling at me through the door like I was some kind of criminal. Before we continue, let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout-out in our next video. Today's special shout-out goes to Maria Santos from Phoenix. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you how this whole mess started. It was a Tuesday morning when I decided to drop by the house. My house, technically. Though I'd been letting my 28-year-old son David live there for the past 2 years. The arrangement was simple. He'd pay me rent, keep the place clean, and I'd stay out of his business. Seemed fair enough. But driving up to the house that morning, something felt wrong. The grass was way too long, brown patches everywhere. My flower beds, the ones I'd spent years building, were full of weeds. Empty beer cans scattered across the front yard, like some kind of trashy decoration. I knocked on the front door. No answer. Knocked again, louder this time. I could hear music playing inside, that heavy bass that makes your chest vibrate. "David?" I called out. "It's Mom. I need to talk to you about the rent." The music stopped suddenly. Footsteps inside, heavy and angry. "Go away!" His voice came through the door, rough like he'd just woken up. "I told you I'd get you the money when I get it." "David, open the door. We need to talk face to face." "No, I'm busy. Leave me alone." I tried the door handle, locked of course, but I still had my key. This was my house after all. I'd bought it, paid for it, maintained it for years before David ever lived here. The key turned easily. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Old food, dirty clothes, something sour I couldn't identify. Pizza boxes stacked on every surface. Dirty dishes covering the kitchen counter. The carpet looked like it hadn't been vacuumed in months. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" David appeared from the hallway, wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in 3 days ago. His hair was greasy, eyes red and tired. "I'm checking on my property," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "and talking to my tenant about 3 months of missing rent payments." "Tenant?" He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I'm your son, not some random tenant. You're both. And right now, you're a tenant who owes me $3,600. David's face turned red. He stepped closer and I could smell that he hadn't showered recently. "You can't just walk into my home without permission." "Your home?" I looked around at the disaster zone that used to be my clean, organized house. "This is my home. My name is on the deed. My money paid for every brick, every window, every light bulb you're wasting electricity on. Get out!" His voice was getting louder. "Get out right now. Not until we figure out these missing payments. David, what happened to your job at the warehouse?" "That's none of your business." "It is when you're supposed to be paying me $1,200 a month, and I haven't seen a penny since January." David grabbed his phone off the coffee table and held it up like a weapon. "Get out or I'll call the police. I'm serious, Mom. I'll tell them you're trespassing." "Trespassing on my own property?" "It's my address. I live here. You don't. That makes you the trespasser." I stared at him. This angry young man who used to be my little boy. The same kid who'd promised me 2 years ago that living in my house would help him save money and get his life together. The same kid who'd hugged me tight when I handed him the keys. "You really think the police will side with you?" I asked quietly. "I know they will." "Now get out before I make that call." Something cold settled in my chest. Not hurt feelings, though those were there too. Something harder, more practical. David had forgotten something important about our arrangement. He wasn't just my son threatening his mother. He was a tenant threatening his landlord. And landlords have rights. I walked slowly toward the door, stepping carefully around the empty bottles and food containers scattered across my hardwood floors. At the doorway, I turned back. "You know what, David? Go ahead and call them. But while you're at it, you might want to ask them about the tenant law in this state. Ask them what happens when tenants threaten property owners." His phone was already in his hand, fingers hovering over the numbers. "I'm serious, Mom. Don't test me." I smiled and walked out to my car. Behind me, I heard the door slam so hard the windows rattled. As I sat in my driveway, looking at the house I'd worked 2 jobs to afford, I realized David had just made this decision very easy for me. I pulled out my own phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Sarah Mitchell, the real estate agent who'd helped me buy this place 15 years ago. Time to remind my son that being family doesn't mean you get to disrespect the person who owns the roof over your head. Sarah answered on the second ring, her voice bright and professional, like always. "Margaret, what a surprise. How's everything going with the house?" "That's actually why I'm calling." I sat in my car, staring at the closed curtains in what used to be my living room windows. "I need some advice about tenant rights, or more specifically, landlord rights." There was a pause. "Is David giving you trouble?" 3 months of missing rent, and he just threatened to call the police on me for entering my own property. Sarah's tone changed immediately. "Oh, honey, this is more common than you think. Can you meet me at my office? We need to go over your legal options." An hour later, I sat across from Sarah's desk while she pulled up files on her computer. Her office walls were covered with photos of happy families holding house keys, all the successful sales she'd made over the years. "First things first," Sarah said, turning her screen toward me. "Do you have a formal rental agreement with David?" I shook my head. It was just a family arrangement. He said he'd pay me $1,200 a month and take care of the place. No written lease? Nothing official. I trusted him. Sarah made notes on a legal pad. "That actually works in your favor. Without a formal lease, he's what we call a month-to-month tenant. You have more flexibility to make changes." She pulled out a thick folder and spread documents across her desk. "Arizona law is very clear about landlord rights. Even family members who live in your property have to follow tenant law." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means you can evict him. 30-day notice, then legal action if he doesn't comply. The fact that he is 3 months behind makes it even easier." I studied the papers Sarah was showing me. Legal forms with official seals, court procedures, timelines for action. This was all much more serious than David seemed to understand. "Before we go that route, though, let me ask you something." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Have you checked your credit report lately?" "My credit? Why would that matter?" "Because David has been living at your address for 2 years. Sometimes family members open accounts using the homeowner's information. You'd be surprised how often this happens." A cold feeling started in my stomach. "You think he's been using my credit?" "I think you should check. Right now." Sarah helped me log into the credit monitoring website on her computer. I typed in my information, waited for the report to load. When it appeared on screen, my heart sank. 3 credit cards I'd never opened, all with my address, all with balances over $5,000 each. "Oh my God," I whispered, scrolling through the charges. Video games, food delivery, online purchases, electronics. Thousands and thousands of dollars spent on things David wanted but couldn't afford. "Margaret, this is identity theft," Sarah said quietly. "Even if he's your son, he can't open credit accounts in your name without permission." My hands were shaking as I printed the credit report. Page after page of debt I'd never agreed to take on. My credit score had dropped from excellent to fair because of David's spending. What do? You call the police. This is a crime. I stared at the papers in my hands. Evidence that my own son had been stealing from me for months, using my good name, my careful credit history, to fund his lazy lifestyle. I can't send my son to jail. Margaret, he's already sent himself there. You're just deciding whether to press charges or let him destroy your financial future. I drove home in a daze, the credit report sitting on my passenger seat like a bomb waiting to explode. 3 months of missing rent was bad enough. $15,000 in stolen credit was something else entirely. At home, I spread the papers across my kitchen table and called David's phone. It went straight to voicemail. David, we need to talk immediately. I know about the credit cards. Call me back in 1 hour or I'm calling the police. 45 minutes later, my doorbell rang. David stood on my porch, looking smaller than he had that morning. Less angry, more worried. Mom, I can explain. Explain $15,000 in credit card fraud? His face went white. It's not fraud. I was going to pay it back. With what money? You haven't paid rent in 3 months. I've been having a rough time. Lost my job, had some bad luck. I just needed a little help to get back on my feet. Help would be asking me for money. This is stealing. David sat down on my porch steps, put his head in his hands. I know it looks bad. It looks bad because it is bad. David, you've destroyed my credit score. Banks will think I'm financially irresponsible because of your spending. I'll fix it. I'll get another job. Pay everything back. When? Next month? Next year? How long am I supposed to wait while you figure out your life? He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. The same expression he'd used as a kid when he'd broken something valuable and wanted me to forgive him. Please don't call the police, Mom. I'm your son. Yes, you are. And that's what makes this so much worse. I stood up, looked down at him sitting on my porch like a stranger. You have 24 hours to come up with a plan to pay back every penny you've stolen, plus the 3 months of back rent, plus next month's rent in advance. I don't have that kind of money. Then you better figure out how to get it, because if you don't, I'm calling both the police and a lawyer. I went inside and locked the door behind me. Through the window, I watched David sit on my porch for another 20 minutes before finally leaving. Time to find out exactly what legal options I had when family members decided to become criminals. 24 hours came and went without a word from David. No phone calls, no texts, no knocking on my door with bags of money and heartfelt apologies. Nothing. So Wednesday morning, I drove downtown to the offices of Henderson and Associates, the law firm Sarah had recommended. The waiting room smelled like leather and coffee, filled with people who looked like they were dealing with serious legal problems. I fit right in. Mrs. Peterson? A tall man in his 50s appeared, wearing a suit that probably cost more than David's monthly rent. I'm Michael Henderson. Sarah Mitchell speaks very highly of you. His office was all dark wood and law books, the kind of place that made you understand why lawyers charged so much. Mr. Henderson spread David's credit reports across his desk like evidence in a crime scene. This is straightforward identity theft, he said after reviewing everything. The fact that it's your son doesn't change the legal reality. He's committed multiple felonies. I don't want to send him to prison. I just want him to stop. Sometimes the threat of prison is what makes people stop. Let me ask you this. Do you want to evict him from your property? I'd been thinking about this since yesterday. Yes. If he won't pay rent or respect my rules, he can't live in my house. Good. We'll file a 30-day notice today. Formal eviction proceedings if he doesn't comply voluntarily. Mr. Henderson pulled out legal forms and started writing. We'll also send a cease and desist letter regarding the credit fraud. Official notice that you're aware of his activities and demanding immediate cessation. What if he ignores it? Then we escalate to criminal charges. But most people get very cooperative when they see official legal documents. 2 hours later, I walked out of his office with copies of everything. Eviction notice, cease and desist letter, documentation of the credit fraud. All of it would be served to David by a professional process server within 24 hours. Time for David to learn what real consequences look like. I was home making lunch when my phone rang. David's number. "Mom, what the hell is this legal paper some guy just gave me?" "It's called accountability, David. Eviction notice? You're seriously trying to kick me out of my home? I'm trying to collect rent from my tenant. 3 months overdue. Plus the money you stole from my credit cards." His voice got louder. "I can't believe you got lawyers involved. Over family business. You made it legal business when you committed identity theft. This stopped being family business when you threatened to call the police on me. Fine. You want to play hardball? I called my Uncle Rick. He says you can't just throw me out without proper notice." Uncle Rick. My brother-in-law, who thought he was a legal expert because he'd been through 2 messy divorces. The 30-day notice is proper notice, David. Check with a real lawyer if you don't believe me. Uncle Rick says I have tenant rights. You can't just evict me because you're mad. I can evict you because you haven't paid rent. The stolen credit cards are just bonus evidence of why you're an unsuitable tenant. David was quiet for a moment. I could hear voices in the background. Probably Uncle Rick giving him more bad advice. "What if I pay you back? All of it." "With what money?" "I'll get a job. Set up a payment plan." You had 2 years to get a job. You chose video games instead. People change, Mom. I can change. Prove it. Pay me what you owe. Move out voluntarily. And start your life over somewhere you can actually afford. This is insane. You're destroying our relationship over money. You destroyed our relationship when you stole from me. I'm just protecting myself from further damage. Thursday morning brought a visit from my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She knocked softly, looking worried. "Margaret, is everything okay? There was a lot of yelling at your rental house yesterday. David's having some financial difficulties. He came to my door asking if I needed any yard work done. Seemed desperate for money. Very agitated." This was new information. "What did you tell him?" "That I already have a gardener. But Margaret, he looked angry when I said no. Kept asking if you'd said anything to me about him. A cold feeling started in my stomach." "What kind of things?" "He wanted to know if you'd been talking to neighbors about his business. Said you were spreading lies about him." "Great." Now David was involving the neighbors, trying to control what people knew about his situation. "Mrs. Chen, if David bothers you again, please call me immediately. That afternoon, I drove by the house to check on things. David's car wasn't there, but the front door was standing wide open. I parked and walked up to investigate. The house was even worse than before. Furniture moved around, pictures taken off walls, boxes scattered everywhere. It looked like he was either moving out or having some kind of breakdown. "David?" I called out. No answer. In the kitchen, I found papers spread across the table. Printouts from legal websites about tenant rights, eviction procedures, landlord harassment. David had been doing research, trying to find ways to fight the eviction. One document caught my attention. A rental application for a different property, filled out in David's handwriting. Under the section asking about previous evictions, he'd written, "None." Under current monthly income, he'd put down $3,200. Both complete lies. I took photos of everything with my phone. Evidence for Mr. Henderson that David was planning to commit more fraud, lying to potential landlords about his situation. My phone buzzed with a text message from David. "Mom, we need to talk. Meet me at the house at 7 p.m., just you and me. We can work this out." Something about the message felt wrong. Too calm. Too reasonable for someone who'd been yelling about lawyers yesterday. I forwarded the text to Mr. Henderson and Sarah. then called both of them. Don't go alone, Mr. Henderson warned. People facing eviction sometimes get desperate, especially when criminal charges are involved. Sarah was more direct. Margaret, he has already proven he'll steal from you. What makes you think he won't try something else? They were right. The David who'd threatened to call police on his own mother wasn't the same person I'd raised. Financial pressure was changing him into someone I didn't recognize. Someone potentially dangerous. I spent the evening at home, doors locked, considering my options. Tomorrow, Mr. Henderson would file additional paperwork. The legal process would continue whether David wanted to cooperate or not. 26 more days until the eviction notice expired. 26 days to see if my son would choose responsibility or keep digging himself deeper into trouble. Either way, I was done being his victim. Friday morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing with 17 missed calls from David, all between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. The voicemail started angry and got progressively more desperate. Mom, you didn't show up last night. We need to figure this out before it's too late. I talked to 3 different lawyers today. They all say you're making a huge mistake. Please call me back. I have a solution that works for everyone. The last voicemail was different. His voice shaky, almost crying. Mom, I'm scared. I don't know what I'm going to do if you kick me out. I have nowhere to go. Please don't abandon me. Part of me wanted to call him back, to fix this like I'd fixed everything else in his life. But then I remembered the credit card statements, the threats, the total disrespect for everything I'd worked for. I forwarded all the messages to Mr. Henderson and got dressed for our appointment. 17 calls in 3 hours is harassment, Mr. Henderson said, playing the voicemails on speaker. We can get a restraining order if this continues. I don't want to make things worse between us. Margaret, things are already as bad as they can get. He's committed identity theft and is now trying to intimidate you into dropping the case. Mr. Henderson pulled out new documents. The eviction paperwork has been filed with the court. He has until next Friday to respond or vacate voluntarily. What if he doesn't do either? Then the sheriff removes him forcibly. His belongings get put on the curb, and the locks get changed. The reality of it hit me hard. In 2 weeks, my son might literally be on the street because of choices he'd made. There's something else, Mr. Henderson continued. I ran a background check on David yesterday. He's been applying for credit cards using your address but his own name. 3 applications in the past month, all rejected because of his poor credit. So he's still trying to get more money he can't pay back? It appears so. Also, I found out he's been subletting your basement to someone named Jake Morrison, collecting $200 a month in cash. My mouth dropped open. He's been renting out my basement? Without your permission, which violates both his tenancy and probably your homeowner's insurance. We can use this as additional grounds for immediate eviction. I drove home feeling dizzy. David wasn't just failing to pay rent. He was running some kind of illegal boarding house operation in my basement, making money off my property while claiming he couldn't afford to pay me. That afternoon, I decided to confront this Jake Morrison myself. I parked across the street from my house and waited. Around 4 p.m., a young man with long hair and tattoos came out the side door that led to the basement. I approached him as he was getting into a beat-up truck. Excuse me, are you Jake Morrison? He looked nervous immediately. Yeah, why? I'm Margaret Peterson. I own this house. His face went pale. Oh, shit. David said you were cool with me staying here. David lied. How much are you paying him? $200 a month. Plus I help with utilities sometimes. Look, lady, I can move out if there's a problem. I don't want any trouble. When did you start living here? January. David needed help with rent money, so he offered me the basement cheap. January. The same month David stopped paying me rent. He'd been collecting money from Jake while pretending to be broke. Jake, you seem like a decent person. David never had permission to rent you that space. I'm not mad at you, but you need to find somewhere else to live. How long do I have? 2 weeks. The whole house is going through eviction proceedings. Jake nodded and drove away. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. David screaming. You talked to Jake! You had no right to scare away my roommate! Your roommate in my basement that you were renting illegally? I needed the money. You wouldn't help me, so I helped myself. By committing more fraud. David, do you understand how much trouble you're in? I understand you're trying to destroy my life. The line went quiet for a moment. When David spoke again, his voice was cold. You know what, Mom? Fine. You want to play hardball? I can play hardball too. What's that supposed to mean? It means maybe it's time the whole family knew what kind of person you really are. He hung up before I could respond. Saturday brought the consequences of David's threat. My sister Linda called, crying. Margaret, David says you're throwing him out on the street over a few late rent payments. He says you've hired lawyers to steal his home. Linda, he owes me months of rent plus thousands in credit card fraud. Credit card fraud? That's ridiculous. David's not a criminal. I have the statements. He opened 3 cards in my name without permission. There has to be some misunderstanding. Family members help each other with credit all the time. I spent an hour explaining the situation to Linda, showing her copies of the legal documents. By the end, she was quiet. Oh, Margaret, I had no idea it was this bad. He's calling everyone in the family, isn't he? Your mom, your brother Tom, all the cousins. He's telling everyone you've lost your mind and turned against family. Sunday, I got calls from 6 different relatives, all concerned, all convinced I was being too harsh. David had painted himself as the victim of a cruel mother who'd chosen money over family love. Only my brother Tom seemed skeptical. Margaret, David called me crying about being homeless. But when I offered to help him find a job, he hung up on me. Something doesn't add up. He doesn't want help finding work. He wants people to feel sorry for him. Well, he's definitely got Mom convinced. She wants to send him money. I spent the weekend fielding family calls and explaining the same facts over and over. By Monday morning, I was exhausted but more determined than ever. David thought family pressure would make me back down. Instead, it showed me how far he'd go to avoid taking responsibility for his actions. Mr. Henderson called with an update. The sheriff's department has scheduled the eviction for next Thursday if David doesn't respond to the court filing. And if he does respond, then we go to court and let a judge decide. But Margaret, the evidence is overwhelming. He's going to lose. 7 days. In 7 days, this would all be over. Unless David had one more desperate plan up his sleeve. Tuesday morning, I woke up to police officers knocking on my door. 2 uniformed men standing on my porch, looking official and serious. Mrs. Peterson, we received a complaint that you've been harassing a tenant and illegally entering his residence. My heart sank. David had actually called the police, just like he'd threatened. Officers, I'm the property owner. The tenant is my son, and he's 3 months behind on rent. The older officer pulled out a notebook. Do you have documentation proving ownership? I invited them inside, showed them the deed, the property tax records, all the legal paperwork from Mr. Henderson's office. After 20 minutes of reviewing documents, their attitude changed completely. Ma'am, it appears your son filed a false police report. Property owners have full legal right to inspect their rentals. What happens now? We'll be having a conversation with Mr. David Peterson about wasting police resources. After they left, my phone immediately started ringing. David, furious. You made me look like an idiot in front of the cops. You made yourself look like an idiot by lying to them. They're treating me like a criminal now. Because you are a criminal, David. Identity theft is a felony. I'm your son. Yes. And you're also a felon who lives in my house without paying rent. He hung up, but 20 minutes later my doorbell rang again. This time it was my mother, looking upset and determined. Margaret, we need to talk about David. Mom was 82 years old, still sharp as a tack, and had never backed down from a family fight in her life. I knew David had gotten to her. He's in real trouble, isn't he? She said, sitting in my living room. Yes, Mom. Real trouble that he created himself. Tell me everything. Not David's version. Your version. I showed her all the documents. The credit card statements, the eviction papers, the police report from this morning. Mom read everything carefully, her expression getting sadder with each page. $15,000, she whispered. He stole $15,000 from you, plus the unpaid rent, plus subletting my basement without permission. Mom set the papers down and looked at me with tired eyes. I raised him wrong, didn't I? You raised him fine, Mom. He's making adult choices now. I want to help fix this. There's nothing to fix. David has to face the consequences of what he's done. What if I paid off the credit cards? Gave him a fresh start. I took Mom's hands in mine. Then you'd be teaching him that stealing has no consequences. That family will always bail him out of trouble. But he's family. So am I, Mom. And he chose to steal from me rather than ask for help. Mom stayed for dinner, and we talked more about David's childhood, his teenage years, all the signs we'd probably missed along the way. By the time she left, she understood why I couldn't back down. Wednesday brought a surprise visitor. Uncle Rick, the brother-in-law who'd been giving David legal advice. Margaret, you've got to stop this eviction nonsense. Rick, stay out of this. David's my nephew. He's family. You don't destroy family over money. He destroyed family when he stole from me. Rick pulled out his phone and showed me something. Look at this. David's been sleeping in his car for 2 days. You want your son to be homeless? The photo showed David curled up in the back seat of his Honda, using a jacket as a blanket. He looked miserable and defeated. Where is he supposed to live if you kick him out? Somewhere he can afford. Rick, he's been lying to you about this whole situation. I showed Rick the credit card statements, the evidence of the illegal subletting, everything. His confident expression slowly crumbled. Jesus Christ, Margaret. I had no idea it was this bad. David tells everyone a different story. Makes himself the victim. What do you want me to do? Tell him to comply with the eviction voluntarily. Find somewhere else to live and start paying back what he owes. Rick left, looking shell-shocked. An hour later, David called me, crying. Uncle Rick won't help me anymore. He says I'm on my own. Good. Maybe now you'll start being honest about your situation. Mom, I'm sleeping in my car. It's cold at night, and I can't afford a hotel. Then you should have thought about that before stealing from me. I'll do anything. Please just give me another chance. Pay me back, all of it. Then we'll talk. I can't pay you back if I'm homeless. You can't pay me back if you're spending money on video games either. But that didn't stop you for months. Thursday morning, the day of the scheduled eviction, my phone rang at 6 a.m. David, panicking. Mom, there are sheriff's deputies at the house. They're changing the locks. The eviction notice expired. You didn't comply or contest it in court. They're putting my stuff on the lawn. Everything I own. I could hear shouting in the background. Official voices giving instructions. You have until noon to collect your belongings, I said. After that, anything left becomes trash. Where am I supposed to take it all? I don't have anywhere to go. That's not my problem anymore, David. You're really going to let them throw me out? Your own son. I'm going to let you face the consequences of your choices. The line went quiet except for the sounds of the eviction in progress. When David spoke again, his voice was different, colder. Fine, you win. But don't ever contact me again. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a mother anymore. David, it doesn't have to be this way. Yes, it does. You chose money over family. Now live with that choice. He hung up. An hour later, Mr. Henderson called to confirm the eviction was complete. Your son collected most of his belongings. The house is secure and ready for cleanup. I drove over that afternoon to survey the damage. The lawn was scattered with items David had left behind. Old furniture, broken electronics, garbage bags full of clothes. The neighbors were watching from their windows, probably wondering what kind of family drama had exploded onto their street. Inside, the house looked like a disaster zone. Holes punched in walls, carpet stained beyond repair, kitchen appliances damaged. It would take thousands of dollars to make the place livable again. But it was quiet, peaceful, mine again. Standing in the empty living room, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not sadness or regret. Relief. 6 months later, I was painting the newly renovated kitchen when my phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen for the first time since the eviction. I almost didn't answer. Hello, David. Hi, Mom. His voice sounded different, quieter, less angry. I was wondering if we could talk. About what? About everything. About what I did. About how things ended between us. I set down my paintbrush and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd spread out those credit card statements months ago. Discovering the depth of his betrayal. I'm listening. I've been going to counseling. Court-ordered at first, but I kept going after. Dr. Martinez helped me understand some things about myself, such as that I was an addict, not to drugs or alcohol, but to easy money, to avoiding responsibility, to making other people solve my problems. This was new. The old David never admitted fault for anything. I got a job, Mom. 2 jobs, actually. Working 60 hours a week to pay back what I owe. How much have you paid back? About $4,000 so far. It'll take me 2 years to clear everything, but I'm doing it. I walked to the window, looking out at the flower garden I'd replanted. New flowers, fresh soil, a clean start. Where are you living? I have a room in a boarding house. Nothing fancy, but it's clean, and I can afford it. The owner is an older guy named Mr. Collins. He doesn't take any nonsense from tenants. Sounds like what you needed. Yeah. He reminds me of you, actually. Fair but firm. He made it clear from day one that rent is due on the 1st. No excuses. We talked for an hour. David told me about his jobs, his therapy, his plans to eventually save enough money for a real apartment. He sounded mature in a way I'd never heard before. Mom, I know saying sorry doesn't fix what I did, but I am sorry. For stealing from you. For disrespecting you, for all of it. I know you are. Do you think we could maybe have coffee sometime? I understand if you don't want to see me. I thought about it carefully. The David on the phone sounded genuine, but I'd been fooled by his promises before. Let me think about it. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. After we hung up, I called Mr. Henderson to ask about checking David's progress. Were the credit cards actually being paid down? Did he really have steady employment? Everything he told you checks out, Mr. Henderson confirmed. He's made consistent payments for 4 months. Both employers report he's reliable and hardworking. So he's really changed. People can change, Margaret. But trust has to be rebuilt slowly. A week later, I agreed to meet David for coffee at a neutral location downtown. When I arrived, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, cut his hair, wore clean clothes that fit properly. He looked like an adult. You look good, David. I feel better than I have in years. Turns out working for what you have makes you appreciate it more. We talked for 2 hours. David didn't make excuses or try to minimize what he'd done. He took full responsibility and outlined his plans for making amends. I don't expect you to trust me right away, he said. But I hope someday we can have a relationship again. It won't be the same as before. I don't want it to be the same. The old relationship was based on me taking advantage of your kindness. If we rebuild, it has to be as equals. Over the following months, David proved his commitment. He sent me monthly statements showing his debt payments, photos of his clean, organized room, updates about work promotions and therapy progress. Slowly, carefully, we began rebuilding our relationship. Coffee once a month became dinner every few weeks. I visited his boarding house room, met Mr. Collins, saw the disciplined life David had created for himself. The house I'd evicted him from was rented to a young couple with excellent credit and stable jobs. They paid on time, kept the place clean, and treated it with respect. Everything David should have done, but couldn't. One evening, as I was finishing repairs to the basement where Jake Morrison had lived, David called with news. I paid off the last credit card today. Everything's clear except what I owe you directly. How does it feel? Like I can breathe again. Like I'm finally free. You are free. Free from debt. Free from lies. Free from the person you used to be. Mom, I need to ask you something. Why didn't you bail me out? Other parents would have paid my debts and let me stay. I thought carefully before answering. Because bailing you out would have taught you that your choices don't have consequences. It would have enabled you to keep making the same mistakes. You saved my life by not saving me from my problems. You saved your own life by finally facing them. 2 years after the eviction, David made his final payment. $15,000 in fraudulent charges, plus back rent, plus interest. Every penny returned through his own hard work. He'd kept his word about changing, but more importantly, he'd changed his entire approach to life. The entitled young man who'd threatened to call police on his own mother was gone, replaced by someone who understood that respect and trust had to be earned. Our relationship was different now, built on mutual respect instead of parental obligation. David visited regularly, but as an invited guest, not someone who assumed he was always welcome. I'm proud of you, I told him one Sunday over dinner. Not just for paying back the money, but for becoming someone worth respecting. I'm proud of you too, Mom, for being strong enough to let me fall. It was the best thing you could have done for me. Looking back, evicting David was the hardest decision I'd ever made. But it was also the right decision. Sometimes love means enforcing boundaries. Sometimes helping family means refusing to enable their destructive behavior. David learned that actions have consequences. I learned that protecting yourself doesn't make you a bad person, even when family members try to make you feel guilty. Today, my house is well maintained by responsible tenants. My credit score is excellent again. My relationship with David is honest and healthy. And when other parents ask me about dealing with adult children who won't take responsibility, I tell them the truth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them face the consequences of their choices. It might cost you the relationship temporarily, but if you're lucky, like I was, you might get back someone worth having a relationship with.